In this video, I'll be replacing the exhaust manifold on a 1988 Porsche 944. When performing maintenance or repair work on the cylinder head or exhaust system, it may necessitate removal of the exhaust manifold. In this case, the original stainless steel manifold on this car has developed some cracks, so I'll be replacing it with a refurbished one from an earlier car. I'm going to begin removing the exhaust manifold by disconnecting the lower connections from beneath the car. And when you're working with exhaust system hardware, it's not uncommon for bolts to snap. The repetitive heat cycles of the exhaust cause the metal to stretch and expand over time, and they become brittle. And I had previously removed the lower portion on this car, and at least two of the bolts broke, if I recall. Typically, you can get a combination wrench on top of the bolt, and as you're turning from below, it'll rest up against one of the tubes and lock in place. And then if you have a variety of extensions and a universal joint, some of the connections are a little blocked off. But once you find the right angle, you should be able to get in there and get everything disconnected. Hardware on the upper connections of the exhaust manifold are heavily oxidized in this case, and these are known to break as well. The factory stud system is installed and removed with a double nut or a jam nut procedure, where you take two nuts and tighten them against each other. I've got an aftermarket kit going in by Renbei that has an Allen key on the end, which makes things a little bit easier to go in and out. So I'm going to try to wire brush some of the excess material off of these and hit it with some penetrating oil and let it sit for a while. In removing these manifolds from the engine, there can be some clearance issues that arise, more specifically when that camshaft housing is still in place. And if it is, you may need to tilt and set aside the power steering fluid reservoir, get the heater pipe out of the way, get everything loosened up and unbolted. It does help if the studs are fully extracted, and then the 2.3 header will come out first, followed by the 1.4. In this case, with the cam tower gone, we should just be able to pull everything right off and not have too many issues. So we'll get it done. Alright, these studs have been soaking for a while, so time to see if we can break some of them free. And these will be 12 or a 13 depending on your car. Sometimes with stuck hardware, helps to tighten it a little bit as well. Help break the threads free. So that one's moving. Just gonna rock these back and forth a little bit. And some of these need to go old school on, where the tight bends on the inside. You can't really get a socket on there straight. Looks like the nuts are moving. The studs are staying still. Alright, well, we've got both exhaust manifold pieces out now, and I only had to remove this one stud here to get it levered out and push down on the lower exhaust pipe a bit to make some space. We got plenty of room here, so there may be situations that require the removal of more studs to get it out, and we'll demonstrate the double nut or jam nut process on one of these studs. So we're going to thread a nut back on, and the closer you get to the point where the stud enters the head, probably be safer if your hardware is really old. And then we'll put a second one on behind it until they're together, and tighten them down against each other. Pretty good. And now, because we're removing, we want the force to be on the inside nut. If we were installing, we would have it on the outside. And just gonna go slowly on this. It's starting to move. And again, you can kind of go back and forth with it a little bit on the threads so it doesn't break until it starts moving pretty good. And once it gets moving, just come right out. And there it is. So 5 more, get those cleared out, and the exhaust is now studless. No real issues there. Before I install the exhaust manifold, I wanted to compare the two that I've got here. So this one on the right is from an earlier car. It is cast iron, has a production date of 1982. Picked this up on eBay for $50, and I had it glass bead blasted, and it's coated in a Por 15 manifold gray, so pretty durable, and it won't oxidize, which is nice. This is a stainless steel tube design original to the car. The 1988 version probably featured the best iteration of this from Porsche, and it's advantageous in pretty much every way. It's got better airflow, improved heat dissipation, and it's a lot lighter. But the one area where it's deficient is that it develops cracks over time. And this one is starting to crack along this line here. And if this were a track car where I was concerned about weight and heat, I probably would have this welded and repaired, and it could crack again at that same location or another location. But because this is a driver and I'm focused on improved reliability, I'm going to backdate to the earlier version because these basically never crack. And so I'll only have to do this repair once. And I just weighed these. This one came in at 18.2 pounds, and this was 9.8 pounds. So by going retro, I'm adding 8.4 pounds to the car. Not really concerned with it so much, but I do like the improved appearance of this one and the fact that I won't have to worry about messing around with it in the future. To get the exhaust manifold in place, I'll first slide the 1-4 pipe into position, followed by the 2-3, and apply the gaskets. Next are the studs. Studs thread in with the short side into the head, and they are torqued to 15 foot-pounds. I'm then going to loosely thread on the nuts before positioning the gaskets and the hardware for the lower triangular flanges. There's a little bit of wiggle room that you can adjust the manifolds up and down, and I want to make sure that these are going to be in alignment before tightening down the top connections. Once those are loosely threaded below, I'll come back and I'll torque all the top nuts to factory specification, which also is 15 foot-pounds, followed by the lower connections at 15 foot-pounds. I've got the top connections all threaded in, and I ended up having to drill out some material on the 1 and 4 connection holes. I just needed to shift over slightly to get the studs on, and I also had to release the lower exhaust hanger because the catback system was pushing up at a weird angle, and that made it a lot easier to get in. So I'll go underneath, connect everything up, and then we'll tighten these down. It took a little while, but I was finally able to get all the hardware torqued down on the exhaust manifold. These cast iron headers are even thicker than the stainless steel, so it was even more difficult to get a wrench on some of these fittings. On a couple I had to do an open-ended and just inch it along. For the torque value, I was able to get a flare nut crow's foot socket on a couple of these and wrench it down to 15 foot-pounds. Then I put the combination wrench on there and I loosened that up and retightened it back to that same position and found that it was about 2 medium tugs for me, and so I just kind of simulated that down the line. With this smaller wrench, it's less likely to strip anything or break anything because there's less leverage on it. So I just did a similar value and everything is nice and snug, and it looks great, a whole heck of a lot better than the old rusty one that was in there. Sometimes working with exhaust systems can be quite a bit of a pain, but this one wasn't too much trouble.